half man, half beast. Some believe it to be the next in human evolution, the perfect blend between civilization and our natural instincts. Others see it as a devolution, more primal and bestial than what we are supposed to be. Regardless of what it is or how it came to be, it is here. It corrupts your body, breaking your bones and tearing your flesh so that you resemble a fierce predator. It taints your very soul, as it twists your perception of good and evil so that you no longer can differentiate between your hated enemies and your most loyal loved ones. The only thing that matters to you now is the thrill of the hunt, and the pleasure it will bring to sink your teeth into your quarry. A lycanthrope is a humanoid or giant who can turn into an animal or an animal-human monstrous hybrid. Technically, lycanthrope is a misnomer and only refers to werewolves, since lycan means wolf and anthropos means man. The more correct term is therianthropes, from therios, which means animal. But since werewolves are the most common type of therianthropes, the term lycanthrope has stuck and become the more commonly used term. Classification. So there's a couple different classifications of lycanthropes that I sort of need to explain before I can talk about them. So the first are true lycanthropes, also known as natural lycanthropes. These are lycanthropes who were born with lycanthropy. To them, lycanthropy is not a curse, but simply a genetic trait that is as normal to them as breathing. They have full control over their form and are not subject to the night or cycles of the moon. Next, we have infected lycanthropes, also known as afflicted lycanthropes. These are people who contracted lycanthropy by being injured by another lycanthrope. These are the more traditional kinds that come to most people's mind when they think of lycanthropes. These are the ones that go berserk on full moons, murder their friends, and wake up with hazy memories of the horrific experience. In first edition, the distinction between true and infected lycanthropes isn't made. They are all treated as infected ones. In second edition, infected lycanthropes are only formed when injured by a true lycanthrope. Infected lycanthropes can't infect others. They also can't gain control over their form, as far as I can tell. They were always forced to shapeshift every night of a full moon and lose control. True lycanthropes make more by breeding with other true lycanthropes, but it's unclear if infected lycanthropes could breed too. According to Van Richten's Guide to Werebeasts, infected lycanthropes could procreate, but the child would only have lycanthropy if the mother was a lycanthrope. If the mother did not have lycanthropy and the father did, the child would be a normal child of their race. However, this is a Ravenloft-specific source, so it may not be true in other D&D settings. In third edition, any type of lycanthrope could transmit the curse, but it had to be from their bite, whereas in other editions, it was just any injury. Additionally, afflicted lycanthropes could eventually learn to control their shapeshifting to an extent. Also in third edition, at least in the Forgotten Realms, the children of true lycanthropes are always true lycanthropes, but the child of an infected lycanthrope is just a normal child of that race, and then when they hit puberty, they have a 50% chance of becoming a true lycanthrope. Fourth edition seems to have removed infected lycanthropes, as the lycanthropes in the Monstrous Manual cannot infect others with lycanthropy, but do infect them with other diseases, and it specifically says that lycanthropy is hereditary. 5th edition notes a difference between afflicted and natural-born lycanthropes, but other than what cures them, they behave and are capable of the same things, meaning that both afflicted and true lycanthropes can shape change at will if they embrace the curse, breed, and infect others. Most of the time I talk about lycanthropes in this video, I will be talking about infected lycanthropes. There are also a few other, more niche classifications that I feel are worth mentioning. Induced lycanthropes are people who shape change from the ability of a magic item. These include Swan Maze and anyone using a Cloak of the Manta Ray. Cursed lycanthropes are created by the wizard spell Curse of Lycanthropy. Upon failing a save versus spell, they are afflicted with lycanthropy, the type chosen based on the animal blood that was used as a material component, and they follow the normal 2nd edition rules of infected lycanthropes, changing against their will on full moons. At the end of every full moon, they can make another save versus spell at -3 to end the spell. It can also be removed by a wish or a remove curse spell if they succeed a save versus polymorph. Quasi-lycanthropes are people who have a trace of lycanthropy in their bloodlines. They are exactly the same as others from their humanoid race. However, if they are exposed to the same kind of lycanthropy as what's in their bloodline, so if someone with werewolf blood in their ancestry was bit by a werewolf and then failed their save against contracting lycanthropy, they would not become an actual lycanthrope. Instead, their quasi-lycanthrope abilities would emerge. They gain the same damage reduction from non-silvered weapons and are capable of casting a unique version of Disguised Self. This version can only give them minor physical features reminiscent of their animal, so a quasi-werewolf could give themselves shaggy hair and pointed teeth. Then you have shifters. These are people with lycanthrope ancestry. Their shifting abilities have diminished through generations and they can't actually shapeshift, but they do maintain animal-like qualities. They seem very similar to quasi-lycanthropes, except they always have their animal traits, while quasi-lycanthropes have to have it manifest. There are also antherians, which are basically the opposite of therianthropes. These are animals that can turn into humans. They are not lycanthropes, but I felt they were worth mentioning. The main difference between antherians and therianthropes is that they are animals that turn into humans, not the other way around. They are damaged by cold iron instead of silver, and they cannot infect others by biting them. They must reproduce. They also hate lycanthropes and vice versa. Examples of antherians include the wolf-were and the jackal-were. And yes, they just have the same were prefix, except it's a suffix instead of a prefix. Now, let's talk about the forms that lycanthropes can take. They have 3 forms: their human form, or humanoid if they're, like a giant or a dwarf or something, their animal form, and their hybrid form. Their humanoid form just looks like a normal guy of their race. However, over time, they take on animal-like characteristics reminiscent of their animal form. A werewolf might have gray hair and a longer face resembling the beginnings of a snout. A were-rat might have a small nose, they twitch often, and sparse facial hair that resembles whiskers, etc. The second form is their animal form, which just looks like a powerful version of the animal they are a lycanthrope of, with the exception that their eyes may glow red and show a spark of intelligence. The last is their hybrid form, which is a humanoid version of their animal. It looks like the animal but is bipedal, can wield weapons, and does other things that resemble humanoids. When the average person thinks of a werewolf, the image that comes to mind is probably of their hybrid form. According to 1st and 2nd edition, not all lycanthropes had all 3 forms. They all have a humanoid form, obviously, since that's who they really are, but some could only turn into an animal, and some could only turn into a hybrid. A few, such as were-rats, however, had access to all 3 forms. In 3rd edition and onward, all lycanthropes have all 3 forms. Phenotypes. According to 2nd edition, the 5 major species of lycanthropes are werewolves, werebears, were-rats, were-tigers, and sea-wolves, which take the form of a seal mixed with a wolf. However, there are dozens of other lycanthropes, ranging from were-boars to the extremely elusive were-dragon. If you can think of an animal, there's probably a were version of it. The only exception, at least according to Van Richten's Guide to Werebeasts, is that a lycanthrope's animal aspect is never a pure herbivore. Omnivores are possible, as exemplified by the were-boar and were-rat, but something like a were-rabbit is just not possible. Contraction. So, how does one actually contract lycanthropy? According to 1st edition, you were afflicted with lycanthropy if a lycanthrope attacked you and hit for, quote, damage equal to or greater than 50% of its total potential, but not actually killed, end quote. I'm not 100% sure what this means, but I think what it means is that if the damage rolled is half or higher than the maximum possible damage. So if it was 2d6 and they rolled a 6 or higher, then you would contract lycanthropy, assuming you didn't die. Once contracted, the victim will become a lycanthrope in 7 to 14 days. In 2nd edition, any character injured by a true lycanthrope has a 1% per point of damage taken chance to contract lycanthropy. So if you took 14 damage, you would have a 14% chance. Notice in 2nd edition, it had to be a true lycanthrope to infect you. Infected lycanthropes could not spread the curse. In 3rd edition, any creature injured by the bite of any type of lycanthrope in their hybrid or animal form must succeed a DC 15 fortitude save or contract lycanthropy. 4th edition, lycanthropy couldn't be contracted, so there's no information there, obviously. And then in 5th edition, anyone hit by a lycanthrope's bite, which they can only do in their animal or hybrid form, must succeed a constitution saving throw with a DC of 8 plus the lycanthrope's proficiency bonus, plus the lycanthrope's constitution modifier, or contract lycanthropy. Behavior. So once one contracts lycanthropy, what happens to them afterward, and what do they do? In 1st edition, they tended to move about in their human forms, but during the night, they usually took on their animal form, and during a full moon, they had a 90% chance of changing to their hybrid form. This seems to imply that lycanthropes could change into their animal forms at will, but their hybrid forms seem to be forced on full moons. In 2nd edition, true lycanthropes tended to travel alone or in small packs and avoid human society. They also had full control of their shapeshifting ability, meaning they can change shape whenever they want, regardless of the time of day or phase of the moon. This is true of true lycanthropes in all editions and doesn't really change between them, so for the remainder of this section, I am exclusively talking about infected lycanthropes. In 2nd edition, infected lycanthropes are usually humanoid during the day. Then at nighttime, on a full moon or the night directly preceding or following a full moon, they change shape against their will and succumb to bloodlust, wanting only to hunt and kill. They become a DM-controlled NPC and seek out to kill those they have the strongest emotions towards, but the lycanthrope makes no distinction between love and hate, so both enemies and friends are their victims. When returning to their normal form the next morning, they heal some of their wounds and have hazy memories of the horrible things they did. Now, it says they are usually humanoid during the day, which seems to imply that they're not always, so it might be like 1st edition where they can choose to turn into their animal form and then have their hybrid forced on them at full moons, but it's a little unclear. In 3rd edition, when someone is afflicted with lycanthropy, no symptoms show until the next full moon. On this night, they involuntarily assume their animal form, forget their identity, assume the lycanthrope's alignment, and then act accordingly. Good aligned lycanthropes seek out wilderness areas away from civilization. They may hunt their natural prey, but avoid attacking intelligent creatures. Neutral aligned ones will seek remote areas, but will attack intelligent creatures if they are few in number. This isn't out of malice, however, but out of natural ferocity and hunger. Evil aligned lycanthropes will seek to murder as many intelligent creatures as possible, often killing their own friends and family, and seeking out areas their victims are most likely to be found. The next dawn, the person has no memory of what happened unless they succeed a DC 15 Wisdom saving throw, in which case they become aware of their affliction. Every full moon after, or whenever they take damage, specifically whenever they accumulate damage equal to 1/4 their max HP, they must make a DC 25 control shape check or transform again, losing control and acting according to their new alignment, changing them back at the next dawn. A control shape check uses wisdom, but it's its own class skill that you can learn. If they are aware of their condition, meaning they pass the DC 15 wisdom save after a full moon, then when they transform against their will, they do not lose their identity or control of their actions, and they can change back at will on a successful control shape check. They can choose what to do, so an evil one would not succumb to bloodlust and go on a rampage, but they would still delight in bloodshed and seek out opportunities to slaughter. Characters aware of their affliction can choose to transform to their animal or hybrid form whenever they want, but they must succeed a control shape check. Successfully doing so permanently changes their alignment to the new lycanthropic alignment, regardless of what form they're in. If their alignment hasn't changed, then every time they are forced to shapeshift, they must succeed a will save, DC equal to 15 plus the number of times they've transformed, or have their alignment permanently change. As far as I can tell, although I might be wrong because these rules are very convoluted, you can never gain full control over this. You still must make a check to resist changing every full moon or when taking damage, and when trying to intentionally change into any of your forms, including reverting back to your humanoid one. Even after you've trained the skill, embraced the curse, and allowed your alignment to change, you can still fail at resisting or changing forms. Now, I've never actually played 3rd edition, so I don't know how high you could realistically get your bonus to this skill, so if getting a plus 24 is possible, then theoretically you could get it high enough to never fail any of these checks, and it would be the same as having full control over them. In 5th edition, people afflicted with lycanthropy can embrace the curse or fight it. If they fight it, they suppress the urges and retain their alignment and personality. However, on nights of a full moon, the curse becomes too strong to resist. They shapeshift to their animal or hybrid form and perform acts that primal form would want. They don't remember the events of that night, but they linger as bloody nightmares. Many see no point in fighting it, and instead embrace the curse. Their alignment changes to the alignment of the lycanthrope, and they learn to master their power, capable of changing to hybrid or animal forms at will. Most of those that embrace the curse succumb to their bestial natures, becoming bloodthirsty creatures that prey on the weak. In basically all editions, infected lycanthropy is considered a curse. It changes your alignment to evil and forces you to succumb to bloodlust, wanting to hunt and kill intelligent creatures. Now, this is the average infected lycanthrope experience. However, some lycanthropes, like the werebear, are good aligned. They wouldn't go on murderous rampages, and 3rd edition simply says they go in the wilderness to be alone, but what exactly they do there or why, it doesn't specify. 5th edition says werebears still have violent impulses. They're just one of the only kinds of lycanthropes that possess the ability to suppress it. So it could be that they go to secluded areas in order to not be tempted to kill. But it's funny to imagine them spending the whole full moon volunteering for charity and helping people. Cure. In all editions except 5th edition, true lycanthropes, as in the ones that are born with lycanthropy, cannot be cured. It's just part of what they are. It'd be like curing someone of being an elf. It's just not possible. So this section on cures only applies to infected lycanthropes, except for 5th edition. In 1st edition, if you eat belladonna within 1 hour of contracting the affliction, there is a 25% chance it will cure it. However, belladonna will incapacitate the imbiber for 1d4 days, and has a 1% chance of outright killing them. Another way is a cure disease spell cast by a 12th level or higher patriarch within 3 days of contracting it. In 2nd edition, it's pretty similar. Eating a sprig of fresh belladonna, picked within the last week, within 1 hour of contraction has a 25% chance to cure it, but it will always incapacitate them for 1d4 days. A remove curse spell cast on them on the night of a full moon, or a night immediately preceding or following a full moon, can cure them if they succeed a saving throw versus polymorph. In 3rd edition, eating belladonna, also known as Wolf's Bane, within 1 hour of contraction and succeeding a DC 20 fortitude save will cure the affliction. Whether they succeed or fail, they must make a DC 13 fortitude save or take 1d6 points of strength damage, and then a minute later they must succeed another or take an additional 2d6 points of strength damage. A remove disease or heal spell cast by a 12th level or higher cleric within 3 days of the lycanthrope's bite will also cure it. The only other way to cure it in 3rd edition is to cast Remove Curse or Break Enchantment during one of the 3 days of a full moon. This causes the character to make a DC 20 will save, breaking the curse on a success. In 5th edition, a Remove Curse cures an afflicted lycanthrope. You don't have to do it on a full moon, they don't have to make a save, it just fixes them. And then a true lycanthrope can only be cured via a wish spell. Vulnerabilities. In every edition, lycanthropes have various resistances to weapons that are not silvered. The lore being that when they are injured by normal weapons, they simply heal it immediately. The mechanical specifics change between editions, however. In 1st edition, weapons that are neither silvered or +1 or better magic weapons deal no damage. In 2nd edition, weapons that are neither silvered or +1 or better magic weapons deal no damage if they are in their hybrid or animal form. In their humanoid form, they will take damage from regular weapons. 2nd edition also points out that this vulnerability sometimes causes lycanthropes to form a psychological aversion to silver, and occasionally, this psychosomatic effect is so powerful that even touching silver will actually burn them. In 3rd edition, infected lycanthropes have a damage resistance against non-silvered weapons of 5, meaning that if they take damage from them, they reduce the damage by 5, and then true lycanthropes have a damage reduction of 10. However, like 2nd edition, this only applies while in animal or hybrid form. In 4th edition, lycanthropes regenerate 5 HP per round unless they take damage from a silvered weapon, and this applies to all forms. And then in 5th edition, they are immune to non-magical weapons that are not made from silver, and once again, this applies to all forms, including their human one. Now, according to Van Richten's Guide to Werebeast and the Wizards of the Coast web article, The Search for the Circle of Valar, not all lycanthropes are vulnerable to silver. Some are vulnerable to other materials, such as werebears being weak to cold forged iron, or were crocodiles being vulnerable to flint. In addition to these weapon materials, each were creature has a susceptibility to a specific chemical. According to Van Richten's Guide to Werebeast, if they ingest or have a wound that comes into contact with this chemical, even in trace amounts, it has a chance to kill them. It doesn't give mechanics for this, but I assume that it would be a saving throw versus death or they would instantly die. The web article did give mechanics, but these are for gas bombs with the substances placed inside and are said to not contain a high enough dose to be lethal, so it simply incapacitates them, which contradicts the claim in Van Richten's that even a trace amount can be lethal. Anyways, those rules are that the Lycanthrope must make a saving throw versus spell or not be able to take actions for 1d6 plus 1 rounds, and on a success, they gain a -2 to attack rolls and saving throws for 2d6 rounds. Either way, they suffer a -1 to attack rolls for 24 hours. I would like to point out that the vulnerabilities listed in Van Richten's are slightly different from the ones listed in that Wizards of the Coast article. Now, the article is for the Forgotten Realms, so if you're running the Forgotten Realms, the one on the left would be canon, whereas if you're running a Ravenloft game, the one on the right would be canon. Abilities. In addition to immunity to non-silvered weapons, they also gain other abilities. I'm not going to go into detail on these because they're mostly just number increases, stuff like increased armor class from natural armor, increased hit dice, and also just gaining the abilities from the stat block, such as things like Dark Vision, Scent, and natural attacks. Some examples are in 2nd edition, their strength is set to 19 to show that lycanthropes are strong, and in 3rd edition, they have their wisdom increased by 2 to represent their natural animal instincts. A lot of these were also dependent on the type of lycanthrope. So in 5th edition, you would have your strength set to 15 if you became a werewolf, whereas if you became a were-rat, you would have your dexterity set to 15. Language. 2nd edition says each kind of lycanthrope has its own language. So were-boars can speak were-boar, and werewolves can speak werewolf. These are separate languages and are not mutually intelligible. The Monstrous Compendium specifies that only true lycanthropes have these, I guess because it would be unlikely for an infected lycanthrope to have access to and take the time to learn the language. It also says that they can speak the languages used by the animals they imitate, but as far as I can tell, wolves, boars, and other ordinary creatures don't speak a language. 3rd edition clarifies that they gain empathy with a creature, which empathy was sort of like a lesser form of telepathy, where you can't give specific instructions or form sentences, but you can communicate with the animal in a primal way by sending emotional signals, so I assume that's more what they meant. Religion. According to Ed Greenwood, no deity in the Forgotten Realms has the portfolio of all lycanthropes, but Selûne and Malar are associated with them and have many lycanthrope followers. Specifically, Selûne is the patron of good-aligned lycanthropes and Malar evil-aligned ones. Some people believe lycanthropy was created by Malar in order to bestow human tribes with the cunning and strength of the predatory animals they admired. Others believe Selûne created it as a way to bless children that had been orphaned in the wilderness to help them survive. Now, there are lycanthrope deities mentioned in monster mythology and some Planescape products, but they aren't mentioned in any realm-specific products, so while they exist in the D&D multiverse, they don't seem to be known or worshipped in the Forgotten Realms. These gods are Daragor, god of instinctually evil and bestial lycanthropes, his sister Ashebela, the goddess of intelligent and cunning evil lycanthropes, Squaric, the sly trickster god of were-rats, Balador, also known as Father Bear, the gentle and kind god of were-bears, who is said to be wise but not intelligent, and his sister Ferrix, the flighty and curious goddess of were-tigers, who is said to be smart but not wise. And that is all of the information I could find on lycanthropy in the Dungeons & Dragons universe. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and remember to subscribe for more D&D related content.